During my time with the police force, one call stands out above all others. It was late, around 2 a.m., when the phone rang in the precinct. The voice on the other end was frantic. A mother crying that her teenage daughter had vanished from her bedroom overnight. At first, it seemed like a standard missing person case, but the details quickly became bizarre and horrifying. When we arrived at the house, the family was huddled together in the living room, eyes wide with terror. The mother led us to the girls' room. The door was locked from the inside, and when we broke it down, what we found made my blood run cold. The windows were shut tight, no signs of forced entry or struggle. The room was untouched, everything in its place, except for the girl. She was gone. The only clue was a series of strange, almost hieroglyphic marks etched into the walls and floor, glowing faintly in the dark. The symbols were unlike anything I had ever seen, sending a chill down my spine. It was as if the room itself had swallowed her whole. We questioned the family, but they had no idea what the symbols meant or how they got there. They told us about a strange sensation of being watched over the past few weeks, and the girl had mentioned hearing whispers at night, but they thought it was just her imagination. As we delved deeper into the investigation, we discovered similar reports dating back decades, all unsolved. Children disappearing from their locked rooms with no trace except for those same eerie symbols. It was as if something was targeting these families, something beyond our understanding. Then, during a stakeout at the house, I witnessed something I still struggle to believe. I was sitting in the girls' room, scanning the walls for any signs of activity, when the temperature dropped suddenly. My breath came out in visible puffs, and an oppressive, heavy feeling settled over the room. The symbols on the walls began to glow brighter, pulsing with an otherworldly light. I heard a faint whisper, barely audible, but unmistakable. It was calling my name. I turned to the corner of the room where the shadows seemed to deepen, coalescing into a dark, amorphous shape. My heart pounded in my chest as the shape took form, becoming a shadowy figure with eyes that burned like hot coals. Paralyzed with fear, I watched as the figure reached out a hand, its fingers long and clawed, and placed it against the wall. The symbols flared up, and the wall seemed to ripple like water. Before my eyes, the figure began to merge with the wall, disappearing into it as if it were a portal, and then it was gone, leaving behind only the faintest trace of those glowing symbols. I fled the room, my mind racing with what I had just seen. We tried to explain it, but nothing made sense. The girl was never found, and the case remains open, a dark stain on my career. To this day, I can't shake the feeling of those eyes watching me, the whispers in the dark corners of my mind. The room in that house has been sealed off, but I know whatever it was is still there, waiting, watching, and maybe, just maybe, it's coming for me next. For weeks after the incident, sleep became an elusive stranger. Every time I closed my eyes, the symbols, the whispers, and that shadowy figure haunted my dreams. I would wake up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding, ears straining to catch any sound in the silence of my apartment. The darkness felt alive, pressing in from all sides, threatening to swallow me just like it had the girl. Desperation drove me to research the symbols. I scoured ancient texts, consulted with obscure scholars, and even visited a few self-proclaimed occult experts. Most were charlatans, but one old man, with eyes clouded by cataracts, listened with a gravity that made my skin crawl. He said the symbols were part of an ancient summoning ritual, one meant to open gateways to other realms. Realms? I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. Places not meant for human eyes, he replied, his voice a raspy whisper. Dark places, hungry places. His words only deepened my dread. What had we stumbled upon? What had taken that girl, and why? The questions gnawed at me, leaving me hollow and frantic. One night, as I sat in my living room, poring over a dusty tome, the lights flickered. The air grew colder, and my breath fogged in front of me. The symbols from the girl's room were etched into my memory, and I could almost see them glowing in the periphery of my vision. I heard the whisper again, clearer this time, and closer. It was calling my name. I stood, every instinct screaming at me to run, but my feet felt like they were rooted to the spot. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to twist and writhe, and from within them, the figure emerged once more. Its eyes, those terrible, burning eyes, locked onto mine. "You can't have me," I whispered, though my voice trembled. The figure smiled, a grotesque mockery of human expression, and reached out with its clawed hand. The symbols in my living room flared to life, glowing with an intensity that seared my vision. I stumbled backward, tripping over my own feet, and landed hard on the floor. The wall behind me rippled, just as it had in the girl's room. I felt a pull, a force dragging me toward it. I clawed at the carpet, fighting with everything I had, but the force was relentless. Just as I was about to be consumed, the light returned, and the figure vanished, leaving me gasping and shaking on the floor. I knew then that my time was running out. Whatever it was coming for me, and there was no escaping it. I had to find a way to stop it, to seal the gateway once and for all. In the days that followed, I delved deeper into forbidden knowledge, seeking a way to counter the ritual. The old man had hinted at a counter-ritual, one that could close the gateway and banish the entity, but it was dangerous, and the cost was high. The final confrontation came on a stormy night. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the symbols I had painstakingly drawn on my apartment floor. I chanted the incantation, my voice trembling but determined. The air grew colder, and the shadows deepened, but I pressed on. The figure appeared, more solid than ever, its eyes blazing with fury. It lunged at me, but the symbols held it back, if only barely. I finished the incantation, and the symbols flared with a blinding light. The figure screamed, a sound that echoed in my bones, and began to dissolve. As the light faded, the shadows retreated, and the oppressive presence lifted. I collapsed, exhaustion overtaking me. The gateway was closed, but I knew the cost. My soul felt tainted, my mind scarred by the ordeal. The girl was never found, and the darkness would always be a part of me. To this day, I live with the knowledge that some doors should never be opened, and some things are better left in the shadows. The whispers have ceased, but in the dead of night, I still feel those eyes watching, waiting for the moment when the darkness will rise again. As a detective in a small town, I've seen my fair share of unsettling cases, but nothing compares to the night we were called to the Silent Woods. The woods, named for their eerie quietness, were a place locals avoided, especially after dark. The trees were dense, blocking out most of the sunlight during the day, and at night, it felt like stepping into another world. That night, the sky was moonless, and the darkness seemed to seep into everything, making the shadows come alive. It started with a call from a local hiker who had stumbled upon what he initially thought was a pile of animal remains. When we arrived, The scene was disturbingly surreal. Under the dim glow of our flashlights, the forest floor revealed a scattering of bones. At first glance, they looked like animal bones, but there was something off about their arrangement. They were laid out in precise, almost ritualistic patterns that sent a chill down my spine. My partner, Officer Blake, and I radioed for backup, but deep down, I knew we were about to face something beyond the realm of ordinary police work. As we ventured deeper into the woods, the eerie silence was occasionally broken by the distant hoot of an owl or the rustle of leaves, but otherwise, the forest was unnaturally quiet. We found more bones as we progressed, each set more disturbing than the last. They were arranged in intricate patterns, forming symbols and shapes that seemed to defy logic. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that whatever had done this was aware of our presence. Then we came upon the cabin. It was old, with rotting wood and a sagging roof, barely visible through the thick underbrush. The door was ajar, creaking softly in the gentle breeze that suddenly felt ice cold. Bloodstains led up to the door, smeared across the threshold and inside. Steeling ourselves, Blake and I entered. The air inside was thick and heavy, reeking of decay. Our flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing more of those disturbing symbols carved into the walls. In the center of the room was an altar, crude and ancient, covered in what looked like dried blood and remnants of decaying flesh. We split up to search the cabin, each step accompanied by the creak of old wood and the oppressive feeling of being watched. I found myself in a small back room, where the air was even colder. On the floor was a large, crudely drawn symbol, surrounded by more bones. But these weren't animal bones. They were human. My heart raced as I recognized the shapes: femurs, ribs, a skull. The skull still had bits of flesh clinging to it, and the empty eye socket seemed to stare directly at me. I radioed Blake, my voice trembling as I told him what I had found. There was a pause, then static, and then Blake's panicked voice came through. "Get out! Get out now! There's something in here with us!" I sprinted back towards the main room, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly. I could hear Blake shouting, followed by a guttural, inhuman growl that sent waves of terror through me. I burst into the room to find Blake struggling with a figure cloaked in darkness, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. I drew my gun, but the figure moved impossibly fast, darting out of the cabin and into the night. Blake and I didn't give chase. We were too shaken, too terrified of what we had just encountered. Backup arrived shortly after, and we combed the woods, but there was no sign of the figure. The bones we found were sent for analysis, and the results confirmed our worst fears. They were the remains of people who had gone missing in the area over the past decade. Locals whispered about an old cult that once lived in those woods, practicing dark rituals and human sacrifices, but no one could say for sure if it was true. To this day, the memory of that night haunts me. The silent woods hold their secrets close, and whatever we encountered there is still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its next victim.